Welcome. In high school, you learned a simple approach to writing papers. This is called the 5-paragraph essay. It contains 3 sections: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. And in truth, this is a fantastic way to think about all academic writing: journal articles, book chapters, review essays, even entire books. They all have the same 3 major parts. There's an introduction, supporting material, and a conclusion. This week, we'll read the first assigned article of the semester. It's a book chapter from a larger edited collection. As we'll see, it's organized exactly like a 5-paragraph essay. It's just bigger. So, if you don't have the assigned article in front of you, please get it now. The skills covered in this video will help you with this article and all others that you read, both in this and other classes. Let's briefly review the 3 major parts of a 5-paragraph essay. The introductory paragraph does 2 things. First, it introduces the topic. Then, it states the thesis. The 3 supporting paragraphs offer evidence that supports the thesis. And the conclusion both restates the thesis and the supporting points in the essay. All of this is also present in an article such as our book chapter. However, the difference is that each paragraph is now transformed into a larger section. So, the introductory paragraph is now several paragraphs, and those paragraphs together comprise an introductory section. So too, instead of individual supporting paragraphs, we have individual supporting sections, and each supporting section is usually several pages long. Finally, the conclusion of an article functions in the same way as the conclusion of a 5-paragraph essay. It repeats the basic argument and the major points already made. When you download something from JSTOR, you always get a title page. Every article in JSTOR gives you a title page, just like this one. The first line tells you the title of the article. The second line tells you the author of the article. Beginning with the third line, we find further bibliographical information, such as the title and subtitle of the book, and the names of the editors and publisher. All of this material must be included in a bibliographical citation of the article. Otherwise, your citation will be incomplete. When you read an article, you want to read strategically. We call this gutting an article. First, you'll read the introduction. Then, you'll flip through the body of the article, not reading it, but instead looking at how it's organized. The last step of gutting is to read the conclusion. The first section of an article will always be the introduction. The last section will always be the conclusion. You can apply this strategy to reading academic books, too, although instead of starting with the introduction, you would start by looking at the book's table of contents. The introduction of an article is usually just a few paragraphs, perhaps totaling a couple of pages. While you read it, look for 2 things. Every academic publication strives to contribute to the body of knowledge. So, the first thing to look for is how the author of the article sets up their topic. Oftentimes, the author will state the problem that they are trying to address. We see this here in the very first line of the very first paragraph. The author, Jörg Echternkamp, writes, "The idea that there are clear lines of continuity from the First to the Second World War is hardly new." As he continues his paragraph, Echternkamp offers a quick survey of other scholars who have discussed framing the 2 world wars as a 30-year event. He continues this theme in his second paragraph, where he discusses how this idea has even become part of popular perception. But then, at the beginning of his third paragraph, he slightly changes his approach. He tells us, his readers, what he's now going to do in his essay. So he's no longer talking about others. He's talking about his own work. Then, in the fourth and final paragraph of the introduction, he offers the briefest outline of how his essay will proceed. In this chapter, I shall first explain and then question this concept. I will conclude by investigating its heuristic value. Before we go on, let's go back to that third paragraph. Echternkamp writes, "In the context of this essay, this analogy is to be analyzed as a heuristic model for the discipline of military history for the First and Second World Wars." This is his thesis statement. You might also call it his statement of purpose. Two things matter here. One is the organization of the first three paragraphs. The first two paragraphs look at the same point. That is, the idea of the two world wars as one 30-year war. But in his third paragraph, he then moves to a counterpoint, specifically his desire to question the 30 Years' War paradigm. Point-counterpoint is an effective organizational technique, and it works well here. But there's a second point that needs to be made about the thesis statement. As soon as I read the phrase, "in the context of this essay," I know exactly what Echternkamp is going to do, and that makes his thesis statement an effective one. I recognize that this might conflict with what we've been taught about writing in the past. We are often taught to avoid redundancy, and it's definitely redundant to write that we are going to do what we are going to do. However, it's better to be explicit and redundant than to avoid redundancy but risk being vague. To summarize, in his first two paragraphs, Echternkamp tells you what others have written. But in his third paragraph, he tells us, his readers, what he is going to do in the essay that follows. And finally, in his fourth paragraph, he tells us how he is going to do it. Once you read the introduction and have located the thesis statement, flip through the article's essential pages. Your goal now is to get a sense of how the article is organized. Make a mental note of anything that breaks with the narrative flow. This would include such things as artwork, photographs, or any charts or tables. Some essays will have subheadings, but here we find that this essay does not. Rather, it uses bare Roman numerals to separate one section from the other. And as we flip through, we find that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 sections after the introduction. But subheadings aren't the only important organizational tool. There's one other: topic sentences. Simply stated, a topic sentence is the thesis of a paragraph. A well-written paragraph will begin with a topic sentence. So, as you get the body of an article, you should also look for the topic sentences. As soon as we flip past section 4, we find the essay's endnotes. And that tells us that section 4 is also the conclusion. At this point, stop gutting. Instead, read the conclusion. You want to look for how the conclusion aligns with the introduction. By way of example, think of tire alignment on a car. If your tires are aligned, you have a smooth ride. But if they are out of alignment, things will be a bit more bumpy. An effective conclusion will align with the introduction by doing the following. It will restate the thesis, and it will restate the major supporting points. An effective conclusion will not introduce new arguments. The conclusion exists only to summarize. And finally, once you finish gutting, go back and read the rest of the article in full. When it comes to writing your own papers, all of this is quite practical. And this is true of any course, not just this one. Like a 5-paragraph essay, a research paper should have the 3 major sections of introduction, body, and conclusion. Your introduction should do 2 things. It should note both the problem that you want to address and how you resolve that problem. Your proposed resolution is also your thesis statement. The body of your paper will then consist of subsections. Subheadings and topic sentences are 2 crucial organizational tools because they help the reader understand your paper's organization. and thus how you support your thesis. Finally, your conclusion should align with your introduction by restating your thesis and your main points. Remember, when writing a history paper, an effective conclusion only summarizes. It never introduces new arguments. That's all for now. Thanks so much for watching. Please hit the subscribe button, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll see you next time.